My name is Josephine Mary Connors, but everyone calls me Josie. My life began like any other girl's in rural Pennsylvania in the 1940s. My father, Anthony, worked in the cornfields, rising at the first crow of the rooster and not returning home until the stars were high in the sky. My mother, Sarah, managed the household chores, cared for 5 children, and even found time to make quilts to sell at the market. I was the middle child, with 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. Our house was small, with wooden floors, and sunlight streamed in through gaps in the roof during the day. Though not wealthy, we never lacked food, and family members respected one another. No matter how tired my father was, he always greeted us with a smile and never laid a hand on my mother, a rare occurrence in an era when husbands were practically the masters of their wives' lives. "Girl, study hard, so you won't have to depend on any man," my mother always said when she taught me to sew quilts. I did study hard, and was the only one of my 5 children to finish primary school at the community school. My teacher, Miss Alana, saw my potential and persuaded my parents to let me continue my studies. "Anthony, this child has a light in his eyes. It would be a waste to let him go." Through the family's frugal efforts, I became a teacher at the age of 19. That was in 1957, which was nothing short of a miracle for a farm girl. I still remember the pride in my father's eyes when I first taught at the school I had attended. "I see your mother in you. Only you are holding books, not needle and thread," he said, his voice choked with emotion. I taught in town for 3 years. The salary wasn't much, but it helped support my family. Most girls my age were already married, some even with 1 or 2 children, while I remained single, devoting myself entirely to my students. The gossipy women in town talked about it. "She'll probably end up an old maid. She's too educated. She's scared all the men away." I pretended not to care, but sometimes I felt lonely. I met Charles at the celebration on July 4th, 1960. He came from Philadelphia and worked as an accountant at the only newly opened bank in town. He was tall, his hair was meticulously combed with hair gel, and he spoke with the air of a well-educated man. My heart pounded faster than ever when he asked me to dance. "Miss, would you do me the honor of dancing?" His elegance was unmatched by any other young man in town. I agreed, my face burning red with a mixture of embarrassment and excitement. We danced 3 times, after which he took me to a stall in the square to buy a glass of lemonade. "I've never seen such a handsome teacher in my life," he said, staring into my eyes, making me breathless. "Are you making fun of me, Mr. Charles?" I said, looking down at the glass of lemonade. After that night, our pursuit caused a sensation throughout the town. A cultured man from the city had actually fallen for a farmer's daughter. Those old ladies who had previously said I'd become an old maid were now whispering that I'd struck gold. But they didn't know that although Charles had a respectable job and dressed smartly, he had no inheritance or illustrious family background. He, like me, had earned his current life through hard work and struggle. Our pursuit lasted 6 months, and my father or brother always accompanied me on walks and trips to the movies in the neighboring town. Charles was always very proper and never crossed any lines. His gifts were simple: a hairband, a piece of chocolate, and once he even gave me a small book of poems, which we read together on my porch. One December evening, under the apple tree in the yard, he said to my brother, "Miss Josephine, I want to marry you. If your father agrees, I want you to be my wife." I was 23 at the time, and I was beginning to think that marriage might be out of my reach, but now I received a proposal from such an educated, hard-working, and handsome man, and my heart almost jumped out of my chest. "I'll have to think about it, Mr. Charles," I said, trying to hide my excitement. But in my heart, there was really nothing to hesitate about. This was everything I had ever dreamed of. A week later, Charles came to see my father with a bottle of fine whiskey and a cigar. They talked for hours in the living room while my mother, sisters, and I waited anxiously in the kitchen. When the door opened, my father looked serious, but quickly smiled and said, "Come here, daughter. Mr. Charles seems like a respectable man, and I agree if you wish." In March 1961, we were married in the Notre Dame Chapel. It wasn't a grand affair. We couldn't afford it, but it was beautiful. My wedding dress was sewn by my mother and aunts using lace they had knitted themselves, and Charles's dark blue suit was borrowed from the bank manager. After the ceremony, there was a small party in the yard, with food prepared by the women of the family and music played by local musicians. Our house wasn't big, but it was truly our own. Charles had rented a 2-bedroom apartment near the bank, with a living room, a kitchen, and even an ensuite bathroom, which was a luxury for me. In the first few months of our marriage, I lived the life every girl of that era longed for. Charles was very considerate. He would pick wildflowers for me on his way home from get-off work, and even if I burned the beans, he would praise them. He was gentle and respectful to me in the evenings. I continued teaching after our marriage, something many husbands wouldn't allow their wives to do. But Charles seemed very proud that his wife was a teacher. "My woman must also have a bright mind," he would always say when someone questioned it. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. 6 months after our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant, and happiness seemed to reach its peak. Charles cried when he heard the news, his hands trembling as he stroked my still flat belly. "Josh, it'll definitely be a beautiful girl like you." He was right. On a hot January morning in 1962, after a difficult 20-hour labor, Mary Ann was born. When the doctor placed this bright red, loudly crying little one in my arms, I felt I had never loved anyone so deeply. Looking at Charles, I saw the same overflowing love on his face. "She has your eyes, Josh," he said to me using the nickname we would all use later. At that moment, I thought I had perfect happiness, a loving husband, a healthy daughter, and a career I loved. What more could a woman ask for? But I never imagined this was just the beginning. The man I thought was a safe haven harbored a storm within him, a storm powerful enough to destroy everything. Like my mother always said, the devil wears a suit and tie. He smiles at you first, then reveals his claws. But this part is too painful to recount now. I need time to gather my courage and continue next time. In the meantime, I want you to think about this. How many times have we judged people by their appearance? How many times has the demon that destroys us been the very person we swore to love to death? If this story touches you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those you think need to hear it. Sometimes, listening to others' pain is the first step to healing yourself. The first few weeks after Mary Ann's birth were filled with pure joy. Although the sleepless nights feeding left me exhausted, and being a first-time mother left me somewhat overwhelmed, Charles acted like a devoted father. He came home early from work to help, changed diapers without complaint, and sang lullabies to our daughter in a gentle voice I'd never heard before. We used to talk about future nights, but now we dedicated them all to this little one who completed our family. "She has your nose, Josie," he said proudly, leaning over the crib my brother had made for my niece. I felt like I had built paradise on earth, a home as perfect as the love stories I told my students. When Mary Ann was 3 months old, I returned to teaching. Although I was reluctant to leave her, I felt relieved knowing she would be cared for by my sister-in-law, who lived 2 blocks away. Holding the chalk again, looking at the children's eager faces, I knew they were a part of me. Charles supported my decision, only occasionally casually suggesting that perhaps I should stay home when we had more children. I agreed without much thought. In those days, it was almost considered unconventional for a woman to work outside the home. Mary Ann's first year flew by. Before she knew it, she was crawling all over the house, grinning incessantly, her 2 newly grown bottom teeth flashing. First she called Papa, then Mama. Charles was completely captivated by her, buying her countless toys we couldn't afford and planning her future. "Josie, I want our little princess to go to the best schools. She can be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever she wants." Life went on like this. Mary Ann was healthy and lively, like a little lark. I continued teaching, and through hard work and dedication, I was transferred to a larger school in town. Charles also rose through the ranks at the bank, becoming a manager. In the small town of Millfield, we were the envy of everyone, a model family. Around Mary Ann's 3rd birthday, I noticed a change in Charles, a subtle change, almost imperceptible to outsiders. He was no longer as excited to come home from work, constantly complaining about the food, household expenses, and even the noise Mary Ann made while playing. "Men need quiet when they come home after a long day at work," he said, his voice tinged with an irritation I'd never heard before. I assumed he was just tired, his new job bringing more responsibility and pressure. I tried to be understanding, cooking his favorite dishes, asking Mary Ann to be quiet when he came home, trying everything to please him, hoping to recapture the smile that had touched me during the 4th of July celebrations years ago. One evening, Charles came home from get-off work in a terrible mood. An important account had gone wrong, and he had blamed his subordinates. At dinner, he kept grumbling, his words so harsh they were unlike anyone I knew. "That idiot. Just you wait. I'll make him regret ever being born." "Charles, calm down." I tried to soothe him, adding meat to his bowl. "It's probably a misunderstanding. You can resolve it tomorrow when you've calmed down."
"I shouldn't have said that."
He slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump, which startled Marianne, who burst into tears. "Woman, don't try to teach me. You think you understand my job." I was stunned. In 4 years of marriage, Charles had never yelled at me like that. This man, with his zhengning, fierce/hideous, face and furious expression, was a stranger to me, frightening me. I picked up Marianne, trying to comfort her, while he got up and slammed the door shut. He came home late at night, reeking of alcohol. When he entered the bedroom, I pretended to be asleep, my heart filled with fear. The next morning, however, he acted as if nothing had happened, making coffee for the 3 of us, playing with Marianne, and even kissing me before leaving for work. I almost convinced myself that it was just a one-off occurrence and wouldn't happen again. But the truth was, these things happened more and more frequently, and the causes became increasingly trivial. This week it was because I bought Marianne a new dress without consulting him. Next week it was because he came home before dinner was ready, and later it was because he discovered I had brought home students' exam papers to grade. "You only care about other people's children and neglect your own daughter," he yelled, tearing up the math problems the students had painstakingly completed. I began to walk on eggshells in my own home, careful with every word and action, afraid of triggering the next storm. Marianne, though young, was very sensitive and had changed. The lively, talkative little girl became silent and withdrawn when her father was home, as if trying to hide herself away. The neighbors started asking, "Miss Josie, are you all right? You look tired." Or, "Mr. Charles seems to be under a lot of pressure lately." I always laughed it off, maintaining a semblance of peace. After all, my mother always said, "Don't wash your dirty linen in public." And I still loved Charles, or rather, I loved the Charles the first used to know. In 1966, when Marianne was 5, Charles got promoted again, becoming a branch manager, a very prestigious position at such a young age. The bank threw a party, the mayor even came, and it was my first time drinking champagne. That night, Charles was radiant, transforming back into the charming, confident man I had fallen for. He introduced me to everyone. "This is my beautiful wife, Josephine, the teacher." The pride in his voice made me feel that perhaps everything could go back to the way it was before. In the following weeks, he did indeed return to his old self, giving me small gifts again, praising my cooking, and playing with Marianne after work. I gradually lowered my guard and dared to laugh without restraint. Just then, I discovered I was pregnant again. When I told Charles the news, he hugged me tightly and paced around the room, just like when he learned Marianne was about to be born. "Josh, this time it's definitely a boy," he said confidently, "a son who will follow in my footsteps and make a name for himself in the bank." The pregnancy was peaceful. Charles seemed to have tamed his inner demons, and his previous irritability never returned. I applied for a reduction in my school hours, and the principal, a friend of mine, understood and approved my request. Marianne was excited about becoming a big sister and even set aside some of her toys for the unborn baby. In June 1967, our son was born. He was strong, with dark skin like mine, but eyes as bright as Charles's. Charles named him Richard, a resounding name befitting a future businessman. He held his son with an almost reverent care. At first, everything was fine. Charles balanced work and family well, taking Marianne for walks on weekends, allowing me to focus on caring for the baby. But when Richard was 4 months old, he started getting sick frequently. Not serious illnesses, just colds and low-grade fevers. But it kept us up all night. The baby cried incessantly, and everyone was exhausted. From this point on, Charles's attitude changed again. His complaints increased, becoming more intense than before. Richard's crying irritated him. "This noise is making it impossible for me to think," he yelled, slamming the door to the room where I was trying to soothe the child. 6-year-old Marianne became silent and withdrawn again in front of her father. One evening, Charles came home late after a long day at the bank, finding the house a mess. Richard had a fever all day. Marianne had spilled juice on the living room carpet, and I was too exhausted to tidy up as usual. "What kind of pigsty is this?" he roared as he entered the living room. "I work myself to the bone to support this family, and this is how you greet me?" "Charles, please," I pleaded, holding the still feverish and crying Richard in my arms. "The child is sick. I don't have time." Before I could finish, he hit me for the first time. The slap was so powerful that I staggered backward, almost dropping my child. Marianne, watching from the bedroom doorway, let out a scream I'll never forget. "Daddy, no." Hearing his daughter's voice, Charles seemed to snap out of his daze. He looked at his hand as if he didn't recognize it, then at me, the red, swollen handprint already visible on my face, and then at Richard, who was crying even harder in my arms. Without a word, he turned and left, leaving only the resounding slam of the door. That night, my last illusions about this marriage were shattered. The man who had sworn to love and respect me had crossed a line that could never be crossed again. As I iced my face and tried to lull Richard to sleep, Marianne came over and sat on the bed beside me. "Mommy, why is Daddy so angry?" Her voice was barely audible. How could I explain to a child that people sometimes change, that when something inside breaks, it releases a darkness they themselves are unaware of? "Daddy's just too tired, honey." I could only say, though I knew it was a weak explanation. When adults are tired, sometimes they make mistakes. Marianne nodded, seemingly understanding, and rested her head on my lap. "Mommy, it'll be all right. I'll take care of you and your brother." Hearing this, another piece of my heart broke. A child shouldn't feel the need to protect her mother. That night, looking at my two sleeping children beside me, I vowed to myself that I would find a way out for them. No matter the cost, I would have the courage to do it. But at the time, I didn't know that it was drizzling outside, and the worst was yet to come. The demon in Charles's heart hadn't yet revealed its most hideous face. When it finally manifested, my life would be forever changed in a way I never imagined. When a house begins to crumble, the initial signs are almost imperceptible. Small cracks in the wall, you cover them up with paint. Creaking floors, you choose to ignore. Strange smells, you tell yourself it's just an illusion. My marriage disintegrated slowly like that, silently, yet day after day, until now, looking back, I finally understand. The man I met at the July 4th celebration, the one who touched me with his poetry and tenderness, has changed little by little. He changed so slowly that I hardly noticed when his attentive smile turned into a cold expression, when his loving eyes became icy, when the hand that once gently stroked me clenched into a fist. Things quickly worsened after Richard's birth. The little boy was weak for the first few months, often crying at night and requiring constant care. I had to care for the baby, look after 6-year-old Marianne, and go to school. I slept little and ate hastily, but even so, I tried my best to keep the house tidy, not wanting to give Charles any reason to complain. But he always found an excuse. Today dinner wasn't hot enough. Tomorrow Marianne's toys were scattered all over the living room, and the day after that Richard cried too much. Along with his complaints came increasingly stern eyes and increasingly harsh words. "A woman who can't even manage her own home doesn't deserve to be a wife," he would say, then slam the plates into the sink, smashing the wedding gift tableware my mother had given me. I could only fight back tears, pick up the pieces, lull the children to sleep, and then lie down beside him, trying to get as far away as possible. I told myself this was just a difficult phase, that Charles was under a lot of work pressure, and that everything would soon return to normal. "Men have their bad days," my neighbor, Mrs. Connie, said when she saw my red, swollen eyes. "Child, you have to be patient. That's just how marriage is." I tried to be patient, praying every day to God for strength to bring back Charles, the man I loved so dearly. But my prayers seemed to sink without a trace. The day he first hit me marked a new phase in our marriage. What shocked me wasn't just the physical pain, but also a terrifying realization. Something fundamental had shattered. The man who swore before God and the entire community to love and respect me had laid a hand on me. Worse still, it all happened in front of our daughter. "Mommy, don't cry," Marianne would wipe away my tears with her little hands, and I would hug Richard, trying to comfort him after this ordeal. "I'll take care of you." It broke my heart to hear such words from such a young child. Me, a mother, needing my daughter's comfort? Was the example I set for her one where a woman should endure everything a man does? In the days that followed, Charles oscillated between extreme remorse and frequent outbursts. He would send flowers to apologize, swearing he would never do it again, but not long after, he would fly into a rage over the smallest thing. I began to notice the change in Marianne. The lively girl who used to chase butterflies in the yard now always walked with her head down, spoke very little, and trembled when her father raised his voice. On Sundays, he took her for a walk in the park. She always came back silent and listless, her eyes vacant. Not at all like a child. "Sweetie, don't you want to go for walks with Daddy anymore?" Once, when I heard Charles call her, she hid under the bed. I asked her this. "No, Mommy," she said, her eyes filled with a fear that unsettled me. "I don't want to be alone with him." Her tone made my heart clench. I wanted to ask more, to understand what lay behind her fear, but Charles had already impatiently appeared in the bedroom doorway. "What is it now? Are you going to spoil her like this? Stop fooling around. Girl, get up and go." He forcefully grabbed her arm and dragged her out, while Marianne looked back at me, her eyes full of pleading. I stayed home, holding Richard, my heart pounding, a vague sense of foreboding creeping over me. They returned a few hours later, and Marianne went straight to her room, ignoring me completely. Charles, however, acted normally, even gently, and brought the two children a bag of sweets. That night, I sat by Marianne's bed, telling her bedtime story. Despite the heat, she was wrapped in the blankets, as if trying to hide herself. "Sweetie, what happened at your walk today?" I asked, stroking her hair. She was silent for a long time, and I thought she had fallen asleep. Then she said in an almost inaudible voice, "Daddy took me somewhere." She paused. "He said it was our secret." "Where, darling?" "A house at the end of Market Street. There was a man there who could take pictures." My blood seemed to freeze instantly. "Take pictures? What kind of pictures?" Marianne curled up even tighter. "I don't know. Daddy made me take off my dress, saying it was a special job." I cried, and he got angry. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink, my mind filled with terrible thoughts, a horrible suspicion festering within me. I wanted to confront Charles immediately, but my intuition told me to be careful. If my suspicions were true, a direct confrontation could endanger me and the children. The next day, I used the excuse of buying bread to wander down Market Street, searching for the house Marianne had mentioned. I found a makeshift photography studio with an inconspicuous sign hanging outside. I didn't have the courage to go in, and could only watch from afar. I saw Charles walk over, greet the man at the door like an old friend, and then go inside. I returned home trembling, a bitter answer already forming in my mind. Although I wasn't sure exactly what had happened, I knew it must have been something bad, something that had hurt my daughter. In the days that followed, I became more vigilant, observing every interaction between Charles and Marianne. I began to notice details I had previously overlooked: his insistence on bathing Marianne, who was now able to bathe herself, his constant insistence on her sitting on his lap, even when she clearly didn't want to, the way he looked at her when no one was looking. One night, I quietly entered Marianne's room and found her sobbing quietly into her pillow. "What's wrong, my darling?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "Mommy," she sobbed, "I don't want Daddy to come into my room at night anymore. What he does hurts me." These words pierced my heart like a dagger. I couldn't breathe, unable to accept what I was hearing. Then, reality struck me hard. My husband, my daughter's father, was abusing her. "Marianne, what did he do?" My throat tightened. Every word felt like torture, but I had to confirm. She cried as she recounted details her child should never know, never experience. The nights he entered her room while I slept, the threats he made against telling anyone, the pain and confusion she felt. I held my daughter tightly, tears streaming down my face. How could I have been so blind? How could I not have discovered what was happening in my home? Guilt overwhelmed me, mixed with an anger I'd never felt before. "Daughter, it won't happen again." I cupped her face in my hands, solemnly swearing, "He'll never touch you again, I promise." That very night, while Charles slept, I packed a small suitcase with our clothes and important documents. I planned to leave at dawn, taking the children to another town to stay with a former colleague. But as I was finishing packing, the bedroom door opened. Charles stood there, staring at the suitcase on the bed. "What do you want?" His voice was eerily calm. "I'm leaving." I tried to sound resolute, though fear consumed me. "I'm taking my children with me." He let out a cold, cruel laugh. "You really think I'll let you take my children? How long can you live without me? Who will give you a house, food, and clothes? Josephine, without me, you are nothing. I'd rather starve to death in the streets than stay under the same roof as you again." I retorted, "I don't know where the courage came from. I know what you did to Marian. I know the photo studio. I know the photos. I know everything you did when I wasn't looking. Charles, you're a monster." Those words were like a fuse. His face contorted in hatred, and before I could react, his fist slammed into my face. I fell backward, dizzy, my mouth filled with the taste of blood. "You're not going anywhere," he roared, grabbing a suitcase and throwing the clothes inside onto the floor. "If you dare tell anyone about this, I swear, I'll kill you and these two brats. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, this respected bank manager, or you, this hysterical teacher?" I lay on the floor, feigning compliance, listening to his threats. But inside, something shattered completely. My last shred of love and respect for him vanished. In its place was a powerful resolve. No matter the cost, I would protect my children. That night, lying beside the man I now recognize as my enemy, I silently vowed that I would leave this house and rescue the children from him, even if it was the last thing I ever did. But I never expected the opportunity to come so quickly. On an April night, everything changed. Even after more than 50 years, time has not been able to erase it from my memory. Every detail, every sound, every smell feels as if it happened yesterday. It was a Wednesday, I remember it clearly, and I came home a little late because of a prayer meeting at church. Charles didn't like me going to church. He said I should spend my time doing chores at home instead of praying. But I insisted on going. That 1 hour at church was the only time of the week when I felt at peace, a temporary escape from that ever-present fear. Richard, almost 2 years old, was already asleep. He'd been running around the yard all day and was exhausted. 8-year-old Marian should have been asleep too. Charles said he'd gone to a meeting at the bank, or at least that's what he said. I got home around 9 and found the house unusually quiet. Usually, he'd be home much sooner and would complain about me being late. I put my rosary in the dresser drawer, took off my shoes to avoid making a sound, and went to check on the children. Richard's room was quiet. He was asleep as usual. But as I reached Marianne's bedroom door, I heard a sound that froze my blood, a suppressed sob, as if desperately trying to hold back, followed by his low, threatening voice. "Even if you tell your mother, she won't believe you. And even if she does, she'll blame you." I impulsively pushed open the door. The scene before me was more terrifying than any nightmare I'd ever had. Marianne was huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face, her eyes filled with terror. And Charles, my God, how should I put it? The man I'd chosen to be the father of my child stood before her, his trousers undone. Seeing me, his face instantly contorted with rage. "What are you doing here? You should be in church." I didn't answer. A primal force erupted from my chest, a power I'd never felt before. I ran over and grabbed his hair with all my might. He was startled by my reaction and staggered backward. I seized the opportunity, scooped up Marianne, and ran out of the room. "You crazy woman! Come back here," he yelled, pulling up his trousers as he chased after us. "Run, daughter. Go get your brother. Go to Mrs. Catherine's house next door," I whispered to Marianne, pushing her toward Richard's room. She hesitated, her eyes still filled with fear. "Go, baby, please. I'll hold him off." I don't know where I got the courage. Maybe anger, maybe the protective instinct only a mother has. When Charles tried to rush past me to grab the children, I stood in his way like a wall. "Get out of my way, woman. This is none of your business." "None of my business?" I yelled, not caring if the neighbors heard. "They are my children, you monster." He tried to push me away, but I held on tightly. Weeks ago, I had hidden a pair of sewing scissors under the mattress, afraid that one day I would need to protect myself. I never thought I would actually need them, but as we wrestled in the narrow hallway, I remembered them. I took the opportunity to break free from him and run into the bedroom. He followed me in, letting out that cruel laugh I knew all too well over the years. "Josh, you think you can beat me?" I grabbed the scissors from under the mattress, turned around, and gripped them tightly. "Stay away from me and my kids." He stopped at the doorway, paused, then laughed again. "You don't have the guts. Don't push me, Charles. For God's sake, don't push me today." My voice must have been unwaveringly resolute, and he took a step back. Just then, I heard the front door open and voices. Marianne had successfully run out with Richard and called for help. It was Mr. Joseph, our neighbor across the street, and two other men I hadn't recognized at first. "What's all the noise?" "Mrs. Josh, are you all right?" Mr. Joseph cautiously entered the living room. Charles immediately transformed, like a predator, instantly reverting to the familiar, charming, and well-mannered man. "Nothing, Mr. Joseph. Just a little marital spat. My wife can be a bit emotional sometimes, you know. But my brave daughter Marianne didn't let the lie succeed. He's hurting me, Mr. Joseph. He's doing something bad." After the child's blunt words came a deathly silence, like a thunderclap. Mr. Joseph and the other two men glanced at Charles, then at me, still clutching the scissors, and then at the children. The pure, childlike fear in Marianne's eyes was more powerful than any testimony. "Mr. Charles, you'd better come with us," one of the men said. I only then recognized him as Sheriff Davis. "We'll talk at the police station." "This is absurd," Charles protested, but his voice had lost its usual strength. "How can you believe a confused child? I'm a bank manager, a respected man in town. I have 3 daughters," the sheriff said coldly, which relieved me slightly. "We'll handle it properly." After they took Charles away, Marianne ran to her neighbor, Mrs. Catherine, for help, and she hugged me tightly. "Josh, everything will be all right. It's all over." But I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of another ordeal. In a small town in the 1960s, it was no easy task to accuse a man of Charles's status. Everyone knew the power, connections, and respect such men possessed simply because of their positions. At the police station, I was treated like a criminal. "Madam, are you sure? Could you be mistaken? Your husband has such a good reputation in the community." These questions were full of suspicion and veiled accusations. Thanks to Father Roman, who rushed to the station as soon as he heard about it, Marianne was spared a formal interrogation. "This child has suffered enough trauma. If she needs to testify, it must be done very carefully in the presence of a doctor." Charles only spent 1 night in jail and was released on bail the next day. Rumors spread throughout town. Is it true? Or is Mrs. Josie making it up because he's seeing another woman? That girl always has such a vivid imagination. Maybe she's mistaken. Mr. Charles is so hardworking, he wouldn't do such a thing. For the next few days, Mrs. Catherine took us in. I didn't have the courage to go back to my own home, afraid Charles would come knocking. The children were terrified, especially Marianne, who would wake up screaming every night. "It's all right, baby," I would say, holding her tightly. "Mommy will never let anyone hurt you again, never." But how could I keep that promise? I had nowhere to go, no savings, and no family in town to help me. My parents were dead, and my siblings had all gone their separate ways, each with their own troubles. Just then, a visitor appeared who would change our destiny. One afternoon, Father Roman came to Mrs. Catherine's house, accompanied by a woman in her 60s. She was well-dressed and exuded a quiet dignity that immediately inspired my trust. "Mrs. Josie, this is Mrs. Augusta Bennett, the headmistress of Harrisburg Women's College," the priest introduced. "She heard about your situation and came specifically to offer help." Mrs. Augusta extended her hand to me, and I took it, feeling a reassuring firmness. "My dear, Father Roman told me about your story," she said. "I've come to invite you to teach at our college. The faculty housing is available for you and the children. It's a 3-hour drive from here, far enough that you can start over." I couldn't help but cry, as if the Virgin Mary had heard my desperate prayers. "But, madam, you don't even know me." Mrs. Augusta gave a sad but understanding smile. "Let me put it this way. I know your situation better than I wish I did. 20 years ago, a young teacher in a similar situation to yours appeared before me. I couldn't help her as much as I could then, and a week later, she committed suicide. I swore that I would never again turn a blind eye to the suffering of another woman. A week later, under the protection of Father Roman and several kind people in the community, We boarded a bus to Harrisburg. I left behind the house, the furniture, almost everything. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that Mary Ann and Richard were sleeping peacefully in their bus seats, finally free from the fear that home had instilled in them. As for Charles, I later heard that he had been transferred by the bank to another small town far away. This scandal, like many scandals involving powerful men, was quietly suppressed. There was no trial, no justice in the traditional sense, but we were rid of him, and at that moment, that was the most important thing. For the first few months in Harrisburg, Mary Ann was almost silent. She spent hours drawing dark, horrific pictures that broke my heart. Richard, too young to fully grasp what was happening, adapted to his new life much faster. I worked hard, trying to prove myself to Mrs. Augusta and build a new home for the children. Gradually, with the help of a young female doctor at the college, Mary Ann began to open up and talk about what had happened. Not just the night I witnessed it, but earlier. I was horrified to discover that this abuse had been going on for months, a terrible secret my daughter had kept hidden out of fear, shame, and confusion. "Mommy, he said it's normal," she said during a conversation with the doctor. "He said all fathers who love their daughters do this, that it's our secret." These words utterly devastated me. How could I not have known? How could I have let this happen in my own home? Guilt consumed me. I couldn't sleep night after night, reliving the signs I should have noticed, the behavioral changes in Mary Ann that I had ignored, assuming were just family stress or normal childhood changes. Dr. Claire helped me understand that it wasn't my fault. Men like Charles are adept at hiding their crimes. Mrs. Josie, they manipulate, threaten, create an environment of fear, making silence seem like the only safe option, she said. You did everything you could, and more importantly, you acted when you discovered the truth. Many women choose to ignore it out of fear or dependence, but you saved your daughter. These words were comforting, but the scars from that night, that discovery, never truly healed. More than 50 years later, I still carry them. They are no longer bleeding wounds, but they remind me of the cost of blind trust, deliberate neglect, and the presumption of understanding our loved ones. As I write these words, I think about how many women are living the same lives I once did right now. How many children are suffering in silence, believing what's happening to them is normal, or worse, believing it's their fault. It is for these women, these children, that I finally decided to tell my story. Because sometimes, all we need is to know that we are not alone, to know that there are others who have walked through the same dark valley and successfully emerged. Not unscathed, not without scars, but alive, and ultimately healed. Arriving in Harrisburg felt like a rebirth. Mrs. Augusta's Women's College was an orderly, peaceful place with meticulously maintained gardens and quiet corridors. My children and I were assigned a small 2-bedroom apartment in the teachers' quarters, complete with a living room, kitchen, and bathroom. After everything we had experienced before, it felt like a palace. The first few months were a period of adjustment and healing. Mary Ann began treatment with Dr. Claire, who patiently and gently helped my daughter process the trauma she had experienced. 2-year-old Richard adapted easily to his new life, charming everyone with his smile and energy. As for me, I threw myself into my work, teaching English and literature to elementary school girls, finding solace in the daily routines of the classroom. In 1971, almost 2 years after we arrived, I noticed a dramatic change in Mary Ann. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on the small porch of our apartment. 10-year-old Mary Ann was drawing in her notebook as usual, but something was different. The dark, horrifying drawings had transformed into vibrant scenes, flowers, butterflies, and a house with open windows. "Beautiful, baby," I commented, a glimmer of hope in my heart. "What are you drawing?" She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a light in her eyes. The light of the girl before the tragedy. "Mommy, this is our home," she said. "It's the home we'll have." In that moment, I knew we were on the right track. The worst of it might be over. That didn't mean the scars were gone. They never truly disappear. But we had learned to live with them, to move forward. Time passed, filled with work, the children's studies, and those everyday moments of happiness that I had almost never noticed before but now find incredibly precious. Richard started school and showed his intelligence and eagerness to learn. Although Mary Ann still had her occasional low days, she began making friends at school, participating in activities, and laughing more often. In 1975, I received a letter that shattered the peace we had finally achieved. It was from my sister, who was still living in Millfield. Charles had returned to town and was still looking for us. "He's been drinking a lot and keeps saying he's going to get the children back," my sister wrote anxiously. "He says you have no right to take them. Josie, be careful." Fear returned, cold and familiar, gripping my heart. I immediately went to Mrs. Augusta, who, after reading the letter, took my trembling hand. "Don't be afraid, Josephine. He can't get here. You have the protection of the college, the protection of the church, and now I have mine." She was right. Charles never found Harrisburg. I later heard that he had been arrested for assaulting bank employees in anger and died soon after in prison from cirrhosis. Hearing this, I felt no joy, no thrill of revenge, not even relief. Only a strange sense of calm, as if a chapter had finally ended and I could finally turn the page. In 1977, 10 years after Richard's birth and 8 years after we fled Charles, a new opportunity changed the course of our lives. The academy was expanding, and Mrs. Augusta invited me to head the new elementary school. It was recognition of my work and dedication over the years. "Mrs. Josie, you have leadership skills," she said, "and more importantly, you have compassion. That's exactly what we need to nurture these girls." I accepted the challenge with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I had never held such an important position before, but I found Mrs. Augusta was right. I did have something to offer, a wisdom forged in hardship, a strength I had never known I possessed. Under my leadership, the elementary school flourished. We implemented more modern teaching methods, incorporated art and music into the curriculum, and encouraged girls to think independently, question authority, and transcend societal limitations. "An educated girl is a free woman" became our unwritten motto. This was a truth I deeply believed in, and one I wish I had understood sooner. Marianne watched me work, subtly influenced by my surroundings. At 17, she surprised me. She announced she wanted to study law. "Mom, I want to help women like us," she said, her eyes shining with a resolute light that filled me with immense pride. "I want them to know they have choices, they have rights." In 1980, when Marianne was accepted to Pennsylvania State University Law School, I wept with joy and overflowing gratitude. My daughter, the girl who had endured the most terrible trauma, was transforming her pain into motivation. Richard, then 13, already said he wanted to be a doctor, to care for others like Dr. Claire had cared for us. In the 1980s, both America and my family changed. The nation entered the Reagan era, and women began to take over previously displaced positions. And I, at 46, met Sebastian. He was a history professor, his wife deceased, and his gentleness and integrity initially intimidated me. After my experience with Charles, I had built high walls around my heart, no longer believing I could trust a man, let alone love him. Sebastian didn't pressure, didn't demand, and didn't rush things. He patiently won my trust, little by little. Nearly 3 years later, I accepted his proposal. "Josie, I can't give you a perfect life," he said as he placed a simple engagement ring on my finger, "but I can give you sincere love and a promise to always respect you." In 1985, we had a simple wedding in the college chapel. Marianne, now a lawyer and a graduate, and Richard, then a medical student, were our bridesmaid and best man, respectively. Mrs. Augusta, though elderly but still lucid, gave us her special blessing. With Sebastian, I understood that not all men are devils. Relationships built on mutual respect, understanding, and companionship are possible. It wasn't easy. The shadows of the past would occasionally wash over me like a tide, catching me off guard and forcing me to retreat to safety. But he never complained, never impatient. "Josh, everyone has their own scars," he would say. "Good times, bad times, sunny days, rainy days, I'll be there." We spent nearly 20 years together until 2004, when cancer took him away. Those years were a time of learning, a time of growth, a peaceful happiness I never imagined. His departure left an emptiness, but not an abyss. Unlike leaving Charles, which felt like escaping from prison, and losing Sebastian, leaving me with a sense of saying goodbye to a like-minded travel companion, my heart was filled with gratitude for the years we had spent together. Now, at 85, looking back, I see a life filled with extremes. A pain so deep it almost destroyed me, and a joy so pure it redeemed everything. I see my children, now grown up, with children of their own. Mary Ann is a respected lawyer specializing in women's and children's rights cases. Richard is a dedicated pediatrician, still wearing that gentle smile he had as a child. I see my grandchildren growing up in a family filled with respect. Respect is the norm, not the exception. They know they are unconditionally loved. They know they are safe. They know they have the right to speak out. This is perhaps my greatest victory, breaking the cycle of violence and writing a new story for our family. If I've learned anything in these 85 years, it's this. Suffering isn't necessarily the end. Even in the darkest ashes, beautiful and resilient flowers can bloom. Our lives aren't defined by others, no matter how powerful they may seem, but by the choices we make in adversity. If you're watching this video, perhaps you're also going through your own dark valley. I want to tell you, you are not alone. There is always a way out. There is always tomorrow. Right now, the pain is so real, so intense, and a cure seems out of reach. But believe me, rebuilding is possible, healing is possible, and finding happiness again is possible. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with people you think need to hear these words.